Good morning, everyone. I know there are quite a few people who are standing outside, but would love to have everybody come in. But in the meantime, I'm here to welcome Arvind Krishna and Witty Bindra. I'm Prashant Gaur. She introduced me. We are roughly a $500 million health IT and defense IT firm in this town, in this beautiful market called Federal. Arvind Krishna needs no introduction. He's the chairman and CEO of IBM. For all of us here, he's a great model. He's a technologist. He's a business leader. He started as the leader for IBM Research. He went on to be leading their cloud practice. And he has led IBM in lots of different areas: AI, cyber, blockchain, and obviously looking forward what he's going to do in the future for IBM. Moderating the panel today is Witty, who we all started from some IIT. He has a very unique background. Witty is the first turbaned commissioned officer in the Royal New Zealand Reserve Force. He has an MBA from Massey University in New Zealand, and today he heads the Kyndryl Microsoft Global Alliance over 40 different countries. Witty, at this stage, you can take it on.
Thank you. Thank you, Prashant. So thank you, Prashant, and welcome again, Arvind. Nice to have you here. That's our pleasure.
Witty, it's actually my pleasure to be here and to speak to an audience and effectively the institution from which I learned so much.
Excellent. So as Prashant mentioned, I'm proud to work for Kyndryl, our IBM spinoff. And seeing the IBM transformation under the able leadership of Arvind, it fueled my passion to form partnership with tech giants. And that precisely I'm doing at Kyndryl with Microsoft Alliances. So thank you, Arvind, for that. So again, today we are honored and privileged to have Arvind with us, a global icon shaping the future of technology. So we'll delve into Arvind's vision for the future, particularly on AI and the future of the business. So buckle up your seats, everyone. We are going to embark on a stimulating fireside chat with one of the most remarkable minds of our time, Arvind Krishna.
I think you're being too kind, Witty.
Thank you. So, Arvind, let me start from here. As you know, AI is gaining tremendous traction. In fact, between 2021 and 23, there were a 33% average growth of machine learning models. So, but AI is not a new technology. AI's origins backs to early 1950s. So what do you think has changed that put AI at the top of everybody's mind, and how the businesses today can harness AI at its full potential?
Yeah. So, Witty, that's a really interesting question. So just as a way to think about these things, there are many technologies that get worked on for years, decades, multiple decades, but that's kind of in a science community. That doesn't mean that it's consumable by people. That doesn't mean it's easy enough. That doesn't mean the business value is obvious, that people will go ahead and invest to deploy, as opposed to invest to progress the technology itself. And I would say that there's three that can be put at an equal level. Semiconductors, big takeoff in the 1960s, and we can see till today what is happening in there. But there was 15 years of work from 1947, transistor, to 1960, before it became an inflection point. Then you can think internet. Everybody thinks of 1995, the Netscape moment. That's when there was a headline in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal about the internet, and every business CEO began asking the question, how do we take advantage of this technology? Roots of it lay in the 1970s, when people like Leonard Kleinrock and David Clark were inventing TCP/IP and beginning to do all the work to make the internet happen. So AI, the fact that it has taken decades, I think we should look beyond it and say, okay, great, got it that it's not brand new, got it that people have been working on it. But let's look at it. 5 years ago, deep learning was the way to do AI. But deep learning meant you said, okay, I want to build a great model to do something. Absolutely feasible, absolutely possible from a science side. What does it take now? Take lots of labeled data. If you want lots of labeled data, maybe that's a team of 50 or 100 people cleansing all the data. Then you hire a room full of computer science PhDs to go build your model. Once it's built, any changes underneath, and you got to restart the entire work. That's a really expensive process. Very useful if your task is important enough, big enough, meaningful enough, but you're not going to embed it across the enterprise. Now with large language models, if you can take data and you don't have to label it, that first cost goes away. 2, using brute force training, you're not throwing lots of compute at it as opposed to lots of people at it. That's kind of the magic of technology. You get a method, the method is really more compute and storage than it is people, then you can scale the technology. So we are at this moment now that you can scale the technology. And if you build your model, okay, now building the base model is expensive. But if you can now do 1,000 or 10,000 variations with a weekend of work and one person, maybe even on a laptop, suddenly the business advantage is obvious to people. The second thing I would tell you, which people don't like to talk about, is look at the difference in nations. Advanced economies, I think all over the globe with no exception, have decreasing population. If you have decreasing population, how are you going to get all the work done? I don't think we have met a technology better than AI that can automate away many, many of the tasks that we face. So when you get this mixture, we all want increasing quality of life. We want increasing GDP. Well, as a economics 101, that means you need more work done. If you don't have human labor or human capital, then you got to augment it with capital. That's basic economics, right? The trade-off of technology and labor. So AI is offering a way through that. So you get these two forces coming together. On one side, the technology has reached a point where you can begin to scale it, and we can get deep into those, but I think you get it intuitively. And on the other side, the demand vector is massive, because if you want to get more output in the economy, the only way to do it is through techniques that give you automation. And this is the best known technique to give us automation, given that data and IT is such a big part of every single enterprise, including government. So I think, Witty, that's kind of what is coming together at this moment.
No, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. But let me talk about IBM. IBM was very strong early in AI with Watson. But now we seem that we have fallen behind, given the likes of OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. Why IBM is not featured as the top AI player in the world now?
Yeah. So Deep Blue was probably the first public demonstration of AI, 1997. Then winning Jeopardy was 2011. But these were all still very much based on machine learning and deep learning. And likely a mistake we made with the original Watson, we built something monolithic as opposed to something which could be tinkered with and played with and easily modified to everybody's task. So when you come to this phase, I might probably disagree that we are behind or not, but what I would agree with, we would never build a B2C model, meaning a model that's out in the public that could be used by hundreds of millions or billions of people, because that is not where IBM has its strength. We are going to have our strength much more in being an enterprise-driven company where we will take models and we will bring them to people and we will modify them so they can use them, but we give them full indemnity, full control over their model, full control over the data, as opposed to trying to harness it into one big public model. And that's a very different business model. So you ask yourself the question, well, is there a market there, or is that market all in the first for one big public model? So you have to look at the underlying business domains. If you're looking at doing search, if you're looking at doing individual productivity, those are likely going to be that there is one big public one that serves everybody, and there is a law of gains you get from everybody living in the same model. Now, if I go to a bank and you say, hey, we'd like to build a large language model to help you deal with your regulators, for your audit functions, for the matters requiring attention, the chances they're going to put that data into a big public model is zero. So that is a market that we will go into. One of the clients we were talking to, and we were saying, all right, we can use a code model to help you improve how productive your developers are. The first question they asked is, can you guarantee me that if in 15 years from now somebody sues us for saying that you plagiarized some of our original code, that we will not get sued? I said, absolutely, because we know how we train our code models. We'll give you indemnity like we do for all enterprise software. So then you get into the question of, but I don't want to teach other people what we are coding. And so I think there's space for both. There is going to be space for massive singular models that keep learning and learning from everybody, and we can see that. I think social media today is a great example where there is sort of Metcalfe's law comes to bear, right? Everybody in one means there's value. And then there's the other side where there is more of an enterprise lens on it, where they want a lot of privacy, but they want a base model, because nobody wants to spend the $500 million or $1 billion it takes to build a base model.
Yep.
So for coding, for COBOL, for Ansible, for Java, for JavaScript, for Go, by the way, for all the unique languages, many of you may not realize this, well, there's a lot of federal people probably in this room. The military, for sure, has built a lot of their own programming languages over time. So has almost every capital markets company in the West. So we can go to them and say, we can take our base language model, programming language as it says, and modify it for your language. And that is then appealing to them. So code is one. We think customer service is another massive one for productivity and this thing. And digital labor, meaning can you augment where, and it's not going to be all human cognitive work. And I know that some people in the room will probably disagree with me and say, all human labor can get this thing. I'm nowhere there. I think maybe a third of the lower order of cognitive work could get replaced by these things. Let's call that digital labor. But if we have a third less people in 10 years, we need this. Otherwise, quality will decrease.
Excellent. So I think a couple of days ago, I heard a CNBC interview where you mentioned that many advanced companies are facing a demographic deficit when it comes to AI. So what advice do you have for the businesses looking to build and retain the AI ecosystem in the companies, and particularly the IBM, how they're addressing their internal AI issues?
I'll go tongue-in-cheek and say maybe that's why our consulting business is growing faster than most of our peers. Look, there's two sides of AI. There's a lot of really smart engineers in this room who probably want to invent AI. But it's like all other technologies. How many people use semiconductors? In this room, I'm going to guess it's every one of you. Anyone of you doesn't have a smartphone? Any of you don't use the internet? So you all use semiconductors. How many of you invent semiconductors? I know one person at least in this room, because I recognize them, invents. The rest don't invent it. So I think we get very confused on these two. The people who will be inventing AI, and that's going to be a small number, probably measured in the tens of thousands globally. Then everybody has to go to deploying AI.
Yeah.
How do I use AI? And I think right now there's a lot of confusion because, as I mentioned, the deep learning world required you to kind of do both together. You couldn't really separate the two. With this world of foundation models and large language models, you can begin to separate the two. So my advice is everybody should figure out, how do we use and deploy AI? How do we begin with a model that we get from somebody, whether it is open source or whether it is in the public domain or whether it is a proprietary model? How do we fine-tune it for our own needs and go? That doesn't require you to be a deep AI expert. It probably does need you to be a domain expert. Then you can worry about all the usual things. How private is my data? Who else learns from this? How do I deploy this? That's where people have to focus. Now, to get going, like in other areas, take another area, ERP. Almost everybody has an ERP system, whether it's for financials or inventory management or resource management or asset management. We tend to use SAP. Many people say, we don't need even the expertise to deploy SAP within our enterprise. We do need to use it, but to deploy it, I might actually lean upon an expert who can help me deploy it. So there is going to be a world for everybody who's in IT consulting in this room to help your clients deploy AI. So a few will invent, or many, many more will deploy, and I think everybody will use. The same as ERP is used by any company of any size. You get beyond 1,000 people, you're using an ERP system. There's no way around it. Ditto, I think, for AI, everybody. Here I would actually bring it down to, even if you're 10 people, you'll use AI, because it's like the internet. It's going to become ubiquitous in everything that you do. So that's kind of how I would play out where the skills have to go.
Great. So let's pivot toward India now. So one of the pillars in this conference is India Rising. And most of the sharp Indian American brains are sitting here. We have IIT directors sitting in the audience. So I want to share some facts about India's digital transformation. 46% of the worldwide real-time digital payments are happening in India. About 1 billion people have Aadhaar cards. There are 850 million smartphones and internet users. India certainly is evolving. So Arvind, you spoke at B20 Summit in India about the massive potential of AI to improve the life of millions of Indians sitting in India. So can you please elaborate on India's huge opportunity and benefit from AI, and how AI is going to play a vital role, key role, to change the whole dynamic of the Indian?
Yeah. Look, it's a topic I'm really, really passionate about, and I've spoken to many people in the Indian government about it, and I think it has very receptive ears. One piece which India should do is train more people on AI, because if there's a demographic deficit in many parts of the world, a place where there isn't a deficit yet, by the way, it's coming. Even in India, 30 years from now, there will be a deficit, but for the next 30, there isn't. So they should train people who can help the rest of the world get AI deployed. And I use that word, AI deployed. Just like India did really well through BPO work, through IT outsourcing, the big boom for the next 20 years will be in AI deployment. That's a simple one. Now, to the direct part of Witty's question. So we have about 60-40, if I remember, rural versus urban split in India.
Yeah.
Then between tier 1 and tier 2, you get down to 20% in the tier 1s, 20% in tier 2, 3s, and then 60% rural. But if we have 850 million smartphones, then there is something, maybe not a great screen, but there is an ability for most people to have some digital connection. By the way, that 850 million is probably more like 1.2 billion total people, because in some cases there is shared access and there is others in their community who can provide access. So as opposed to thinking that services are only available to people in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, it becomes a great way. Now, if you need a human on the other end, it is an impossible cost and price, and it'll take you 3-4 decades to go get there. But can you bring more education into every village by using and leveraging AI to act as a tutor for people? Can you give AI to the local farmer, the small plot holder with only 1, 2, 3 acres to get direct access to the price? I mean, I don't think people realize this. Often the cost or the price that a farmer can get is only 10% of the final value, because you're going from there to an aggregator, you're going from an aggregator to a mandi or a market, you're going from there to a factory, and then eventually to a product. Can you begin to shortcut some of this by getting much more direct access to all of these things? Take fertilizer. How do people use fertilizer today? It's kind of like the oldest and worst possible way. Well, we're just going to put down 10 kilograms of fertilizer in this field because that's what we were told. So looking at rain, looking at soil quality, looking at the crop quality is not there. Can a phone with a camera, doesn't even need a screen, just take a picture, and based on the plant and the leaf and the color, and by guessing on the soil moisture from one photograph, you can then say, use only half the fertilizer, which means you can now get maybe twice the impact of what is needed. So there are so many things that could be enabled by taking AI across the country, whether it's on education, which means opportunity in the end for people, whether it's on government services, whether it's on improving the quality and outcome of rural India, that this is, I think, so exciting that it's a way to begin to scale the advancement. So as opposed to confining most of the upliftment to about half the country, you can now bring it to 80% of the country. And this, I think, is a really big topic that has to happen. There are pockets here and there which got success. There are parts in Tamil Nadu. There are some parts in northeast Karnataka. There are parts in the Terai region in UP where you're beginning to see some of these things, but they're still small scale. I think we need to make them much more massive scale. But I think the government's appetite to leverage digital public infrastructure, I think that's the word they use, DPI, to be able to get services to people and to cut out some of the, I'll use the word overhead. There are less polite words sometimes used between the person who receives the service and the funding agency, which is often the government. But let's use the word less overhead and less middlemen is, I think, a massive advantage that could be gained using these infrastructures that are there.
Yeah. You know, I was fortunate enough to be attending Honorable Prime Minister Modi's talk, I think couple of years ago. And we all know AI is artificial intelligence. And he was in America, and he said AI means America, India. So that was like a sort of blown things off that, hey, India is so seriously looking about these technologies and they're trying to work with the US, and that was fantastic. So Arvind, again, I'm trying to be fair to my conference, IIT2024. Our next one vertical is energy, and now I want to talk about energy and sustainability. So you were recently in Dubai at COP28. It's as a most important climate and sustainable event in the world. Given that you are seen, how can AI and other technologies help organizations make sustainable central to business strategy? Whether it's meeting customer demands or lowering cost or creating new values for the customer?
Yeah. Look, so I'll first begin with, there's a lot of debate about the word ESG, and the S in ESG is the sustainability piece. But I actually don't think that there should be a debate. This is a case where purpose and profit go together. I'll begin with a great example actually from Abu Dhabi. So you mentioned COP28 in Dubai. So you can use satellite imagery to begin to understand where there are heat spots within a city, because as we all know, right? I mean, about 50 degrees centigrade is where humans can live. Above that is almost impossible. If you go to wet bulb temperatures, I think it's 38 degrees. Above that, humans can't really survive. You basically begin to get cooked. Below that, you can survive. So there's many areas in the world where we're within plus minus 2 degrees of these very, very threshold temperatures. So if you're getting an urban heat spot, what could you do? Can you begin to cut down on what is producing heat in those urban heat spots? Can you begin to drive those activities into other parts? Can city planners begin to use that to say, okay, I need more greening? We know that trees will reduce temperature by 4 to 5 degrees because of the canopy and the leaves and so forth. So that is a very tiny example, but that is driven by AI. Because if you ask an urban planner, look at the city map and decide where there's a heat spot, I mean, like, it's almost impossible. You can only do this, I think, using satellite imagery or maybe drones. I mean, the combination can certainly help. But let's step back. So I am an engineer. Let me just put that out there, which means I tend to be data-driven. I like to find solutions. We know that about a good 30% of all energy is wasted. Okay. So if we can, on sustainability, turn around and say, we can save 30% of all energy by taking away that waste. So you're looking at me and saying, no, 30%, this is a made-up number, really? 30% of all truck miles are empty. 30% of all containers across the oceans go empty. How many buildings are telling you that they are absolutely taking the temperature in the summer to 80 degrees plus overnight when there's almost nobody in the building? How many in winter take the temperature down to below 60 during the night when there's no people in the building? How many buildings do you go past where the lights are on because people haven't bothered to switch them off? Really, it's a $2 sensor. You'll get your money back in less than 3 months at today's price of electricity and energy. As you begin to go down this path of can you use automation and AI and all of the cheap sensors. Sensors now are like $1, $2, $5 at the most to go down. So that is on the downstream side of 30%. There's another 30% you can get on the upstream side by looking at the wastage. Why is methane flared and burnt? How much leakage is there on the upstream side? By the way, do you know that on an average oil well, since you're talking energy, how much of the oil is extracted from an average oil well? 30% of the capacity. After that, you cap it and shut it down because it becomes too expensive to extract more oil. Couldn't we invent better material science and lubricants to get more out using technology? Is the second side. So 30% there, another 30% on the upstream side. And then I get to circularity. If we can get to be more circular, so what do we do? 400 million tons of plastic, I think we produce. Vast majority, 98%, is put into landfills or not recycled. Could we recycle more? Now you'll say, what about that? Well, it needs a little bit of an economic incentive. And that is where taxation can come into play. That if you put a little bit of an economic incentive, suddenly circular plastic is cheaper than new plastic. Today, new plastic is cheaper than circular plastic. So this is where you can change, and then you can get into circularity of plastics, which is not all, but it is 40% of the total feed. And so I think there's a lot which can be done using all of these together to take away half the problem of greenhouse gases. Half may not be perfect, but it's a long way from doing none of it, which is today's state of the art.
Yep. So, I feel I keep on talking to Arvind. There's no end to it, but we have limited time. So I'll just ask the final question. Arvind, on a personal and professional growth, is there any one or two special learnings from your life that you consider had made a deep impact in shaping your career and personal life, covering the period from IIT Kanpur to IBM US?
Look, I'm going to say this very directly. I personally learned a huge amount from being at IIT Kanpur. I went from a tiny little school in Tamil Nadu. My awareness of, education of the world was minimal. I grew up in a small town called Kunur, which almost nobody will know in Tamil Nadu. And it was a small school. It wasn't one of the big, well-known schools. When I got to IIT Kanpur, I learned a lot. It enabled me to step up to doing what I'm doing today in terms of how do you learn, how do you think about topics, what you learned from the faculty, what you learned from the students. What enabled that? The institutions that the government of India built in the 50s and 60s. So let's be clear, I was a direct product of the investment that somebody else made. So let me ask you, so that was a learning I probably didn't have at that time, but over the next 10 years, I absolutely got it. I would ask you, how many of you give back to the communities you live in, you participate in as big a way as what you took away that allowed you to get to where you are? Do you help your communities with respect to the elderly who are there? How about those who are food deficient, whether you want to call it food kitchens or meals for the elderly? How about participating in politics? Not because you want to be a politician, but because you want to influence the policies and laws which could get made. The easiest way to do that is by helping certain people succeed who will then be the champions for those policies. I think that there is so much to do, both locally, first always, then at a national level, and then at an international level in terms of institution building and giving back. I believe fundamentally, do it in your professional life and do it in your personal life. A lot of people talk about whether it's in all religions and all cultures, one has to give back a certain amount. I think you should all do that, would be my plea to all of you.
So thank you, Arvind. Now is the time for question and answer, please. So thanks to the moderator and thanks to curator. I have got a lot of questions on my phone, so I have to pick, and I've got a couple of them here. So the first one is, what ethical issues do you see around AI adoption by IBM, and what is IBM's role in promoting AI ethics and responsibility?
Look, we've been pretty vocal that there should be guardrails on AI. So we've been completely vocal. We endorsed what various governments have been doing across whether it's India, Japan, EU, US. We participate in the forums with the US Congress, Senate, Department of Commerce, Department of Homeland Security, the White House. So should there be guardrails? Should there be some regulation? We absolutely believe that, as opposed to saying there shouldn't be. But we also advocate it should remain an open ecosystem, not a closed ecosystem. And we believe that people who build models should be held responsible in a legal sense for the models they build. But there's a wider question in here, I think, Witty. The wider question is, what are the ethics on AI usage? Look, there has to be coming together. This is either going to be through the court system or through Congress. I don't know which of the two will win here. What is fair use of underlying data? We know in songs, I'll give you a great example from music because it's unemotional. If you want to buy a record and play it in your house, of course you can, because in some sense the fair value was when you purchased the music. If you want to play it for a small group of friends, that's considered fair use. If you want to play it in this forum publicly, that's not fair use. You have to actually pay a small royalty back to the original publisher. If you want to stream it over the internet, you owe more of a royalty back to the publisher. This is decided in law and in courts. It's called copyright law. So if you use a book and you read it for yourself, that's fair use. If I use it to train an AI model, is that fair use? I'm not commenting on is it or is it not. I am declaring, though, that the legal system has to decide what is fair use in this new context. The same way as when television came around, streaming kind of got decided in the context of television rights, because that was the first and original streaming. I'm 100% sure that the packet network people are looking at me and saying, television is streaming? Yes, television is streaming, yeah, for an analog form. So these are ethical issues on the training side. Then, if I use AI to do something and I give you a wrong recommendation for something you should wear or buy, okay, I mean, like, you know, the end harm is limited. You decide that you're going to build an 18-wheeler truck that is going to drive 90 miles an hour down the highway and happen to crush a few other vehicles along the way. Okay, that's a little bit not so reversible, is it? So I think you got to decide what is the risk in the use case, and then how many guardrails you put. So I believe that the risk-based, hey, if the risk is tiny, probably let people experiment and go. If the risk is medium, some guardrails. If the risk is very high, you got to put more guardrails. I know that our tech industry hates guardrails because the word of, oh my God, it'll slow down innovation. Well, the medical people seem to have figured it out. They do a lot of innovation. But if the harm can be extreme, there's more guardrails. And if the harm is less, there's less guardrails. So, sorry, really long answer to your question.
That was a good answer, because that is, I remember a lot of people, like 25 years ago, I went to the MBA school and we learned about ethics. And we always heard and learned that it's a very fine line, how to increase your like share values and how to increase your bottom line, but you have to go with the ethics, some governance has to be there. So I think it's very important to know, and of course coming from Arvind's, what ethic responsibility we all have. So AI should make this world a better place to live. It should not go the other way around. So thanks Arvind. Next, I'm very fascinated by quantum computing. And I think that is one of your area you really like, that quantum computing, blockchain, and AI. So the question I have come from the audience is, IBM has been investing in quantum computing. How do you see that intersection of AI and quantum computing shaping the future of business and technology?
Yeah. So I think quantum computing is going to make a massive difference first. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? It's in that range. So we are now in the realm of engineering, not in the realm of we need to make massive progress on the underlying science per se. So I'm not going to trivialize it. It is a hot topic. It's not an easy thing. So you say, why do you bother? You bother because a little bit appealing to some of the geeks in the room, and I'm one, so I'm part of the community, I'll say. The set of problems you can solve with today's computers, because today's computers are deterministic, repeatable, so you kind of live in that world, is kind of like this. The set of all problems is massive. I think people don't recognize that. You can't even touch these other problems on today's deterministic computers, however big they happen to be. Quantum, because of the way it works, offers a set of problems that while there is some overlap with the existing computers, there is a set of other problems you can solve. What's an example? Take a caffeine molecule. The caffeine molecule, we know that when we drink caffeine, it helps to energize us. Not everybody, but most people. And it keeps you awake for a bit longer than it might otherwise, etc. Wide area of stimulants. Caffeine molecule has 160 electrons. We know the molecule. Why does it have the effect that it does? That is based on the intersection of the molecule shape with other things that are happening in our body. There is no way a classical computer can do this. And you look at me and say, really? 160 electrons means that if you need to get into it, the only way we know today is kind of brute force. So you need 2 to the 160 states to be very kind of intuitive about it. You're running out of capacity. 2 to the 160, you'll very quickly conclude you can't possibly do on a normal computer. Well, a 500 qubit quantum computer can probably do that. So then let's talk about lithium hydride. Let's talk about EV batteries. We can talk about materials. We can talk about lubricants, back to my oil and gas example. We can think about materials using carbon. We can think about circularity. We can think about carbon sequestration. These problems can all be addressed using quantum. Then you ask about the intersection of quantum and AI. Yeah. Scientific discovery, I think, is going to get driven at this intersection of quantum and AI. Can I invent a new material? Let's use AI to crawl through all of the existing things and tell us what we know and what we don't know. What about the gap? Can I use quantum to say, is there something that can fill in part of those gaps? Then you go back into the AI and say, okay, if I put that into the knowledge base, now what more can I do? This intersection of scientific discovery, so contrary to the people who kind of say scientific discovery is done, we have invented everything, I think we're at the beginning. We've kind of come the little bit we could using slow human minds. Now we're going to put human minds in conjunction with these techniques of quantum and AI, and there's going to be an explosion. I think it'll begin in the materials world. It'll then go very quickly into the risk world, and then it'll go into other scientific domains from there. So that's the order that I would predict right now.
So my screen is saying time is up, but I don't want to displease the academias in the audience. So I have a question from academia world. Being from academia, I wonder about the future of academia world in the era of AI. Your thoughts?
Look, I personally think this is the old debate. Okay, when I went to IIT Kanpur, there was still a debate going on, should you be allowed calculators, should you be not? IIT said absolutely use them. All we'll do is give you problems that the calculator is useful, but you can't solve using only a calculator or a predetermined programmed formula. And it was pretty obvious. You could have an open book exam. It didn't help you to do all that. Okay, so that debate got done. When Wikipedia came along, people said, oh my God, people aren't going to do research. So could you stop going to a physical library? Sure. But people could still have to write papers and have original thought. I think this now comes down to critical thinking. So as opposed to asking people to regurgitate information and just aggregate information, I think the old system of a more on-the-spot or of critical thinking or of the old Socratic way of, I'm going to ask you questions and you have to answer them out of your own brain has to become the way. But critical thinking is where I'm going. Critical thinking is still very much a human domain thought. And critical thinking is what is going to drive our future. And I would urge every academic to think about how do you make your students into better critical thinkers? And that, I think, is going to be the answer. A lot of what we talk about will get solved.
So, Arvind, this was really a fascinating and stimulating fire chat. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the audience supporting Arvind. So,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Witty. Thank you for leading a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Arvind, for being with us. Now, as a capstone to our conversation, we just want to share a very short video with you that tells a little bit more about the amazing work that's happening at IBM.
IBM is the home of computing, past, present, and future. We recognize the immense power and potential of computing, not as a commodity, but as an agent of progress and connection. We invest in and create the fundamental technologies that power the world of computing. It would be impossible to tell the story of computing without IBM. Our community of researchers, developers, product managers, and designers continue to push the boundaries for IBM, our clients, and the world of business. Building what's next is where our commitment to client excellence begins.
Thank you. Thank you again to IBM for being one of our valued sponsors, and to Prashant and Credence Management for also being one of our fabulous sponsors.